It seems like the beginnings of a new kind of Cold War, a Cold War that everybody could lose.
I've argued that we're going into a new Cold War.
Dr. Kissinger warned us last November that China and the United States are the foothill of a new Cold War. I think now we are moving that direction.
China-US ties are at their lowest ebb since 1979. It's an alarming situation, but does the deterioration in relations amount to a new Cold War? A recent study by Renmin University of China found more than 60% of Chinese scholars think Washington is indeed waging a form of Cold War against Beijing, but 82% don't believe it resembles the U.S. Soviet Union deep freeze. Their logic is straightforward. Globalization has meant intertwining interests between the world's largest two economies, and this makes decoupling and isolation unlikely. According to the US-China Business Council, 97% of American firms made a profit in China last year. Nearly half of them reported higher profit margins for their China-based subsidiaries than their overall operations. Before Donald Trump's unilateral trade war, Chinese investment in 46 US states created more than 140,000 jobs in 2015. Attempts to forge a new Cold War jeopardize all these benefits.
U.S. retailers also do a lot of business in China. Many retailers have substantial investments in China. The Chinese middle class is larger than the entire population of the United States. And so abandoning China is an unrealistic strategy to begin with and would hurt a lot of American businesses severely.
Ultimately, mutual dependency limits the chances of a U.S. Soviet Union-style standoff. The world's superpower relies on China for manufacturing. Just have a peek at the two countries' mask production capability during the pandemic. According to the National Development and Reform Commission, China's daily capacity for facial masks reached 110 million units at the end of February. American manufacturers could only make 70 million a month in spite of the surge in confirmed coronavirus cases. The Straits Times reported that China supplies nearly half of the personal protective equipment imported to the United States. China, on the other hand, relies on the US high-tech industry. There is no denying China has developed rapidly in recent years, but the US competitive edge in the high-end sectors is an irrefutable fact. American components are vital to Chinese tech firms. Neither side would benefit from decoupling.
There's a movement afoot to completely decouple our economies, basically saying that American companies should not do any business in China. And that's a very dangerous precedent. Are we to say that American companies cannot sell or should not sell their products and services into China? Are we to stop all exports, whether farm goods or manufactured goods, from medical equipment to food to Boeing airplanes to China? Where does this end?
China has reiterated it has no desire for a Cold War. And though anti-China hawks in the US have called for tougher measures on Beijing, does the country really want to fight a Cold War against China? Embattled by the coronavirus pandemic, a jobs crisis, racial discrimination, and a widening wealth gap, American politicians and citizens already have plenty of domestic headaches. In addition, ideological confrontation between capitalism and socialism is less stark in the 21st century. No country wants to choose sides between China and the US in the era of globalization, when ties with both create the greatest benefits for all. While a Cold War repeat is hard to imagine, tensions in Beijing-Washington ties are likely to continue as long as differences in the two countries' perceptions of one another persist. China believes the US is bent on containing it for hegemonic purposes, while Washington fears Beijing aims to overtake it to be the world's dominant power. A lack of mutual trust is a direct cause for the deteriorating ties between the two countries. According to The Diplomat, the GDP of the Soviet Union was only 40% of that of the US at its high point, but China's is already at 65%. Together, China and the US account for around 40% of global GDP. China is not the former Soviet Union. The US is not the country it was during the Cold War, and the world is a very different place. The Cold War should remain in the history books. A rerun would have no winners.